Yo, what's poppin'? It's Tommathan, and we have one of the sadder team recaps for the season with the Chengdu Hunters. Definitely not the follow up season they were looking for after coming second in two different tournaments last year and having Leave be the season MVP of the league. They made no tournaments, no playoffs. Their best record in the stage was 3-3, and it just wasn't great. And the problems for them began even before the season. They were supposed to have a much larger roster featuring a lot of what would become the ending Guangzhou Charge roster, which was supposed to feature, I believe, Jimmy, Aprita, Farway, and Zernius slash Eveltal. And it looks like they decided, as their sixth man, they wanted Daitzi instead of a Aprita or a Jimmy. I was lobbying, I guess, for Aprita because I think it would have been better to just let Gaga run it as a solo tank. And in the end, I think that still probably would have been the better decision. And not even because, well, first, Daichi didn't have a great season. His Sigma was pretty good. But other than that, in the Countdown Cup, whenever he was forced to play the Diva, the Zarya, it didn't really impress me very much. It felt like he was a step behind the rest of the competition. And then you also have to factor in that Leave was basically forced onto sojourn duty the entire season, which is not great. You want Leave to play whatever he thinks he'll carry on more. It's similar to Proper. Whatever he thinks he'll carry on more, you put him on it. And I'm not saying his Sojourn was bad. I think Leave was still the best player on this team by a pretty decent margin. But I think he could be even more. Obviously, he didn't have the MVP performance of last year. And that's just because he wasn't able to play flex DPS. His hit scan's good, but you want him on that flex. And it's not even like Jinmu had a bad season either. His Genji was quite good a lot of the time. Sometimes he looked like the best Genji in the league, especially against Philly. As you can see, they have 3 wins against Philly. Philly couldn't buy a win until the Countdown Cup. And it's because Jinmu played out of his mind each and every time. But he was inconsistent, and he doesn't have a tracer that's up to par with a lot of the top end, APAC talent, whether it be Profit, Zest, Choice A1, those kind of players. So I think Aprita would have been beneficial for this team instead of Daichi. So I think that's kind of already an error to start off the year. But hindsight's 2020, it could have worked out differently. Gaga maybe doesn't have the ability to play all the heroes, even though whenever he did dabble, I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was anything special, but I thought it was okay. Whatever. So anyway, looking at this team overall before I delve more into the players, they finished 6th out of 7th in APAC with a 9-15 record, a -3 map differential, and 9 points because, again, no tournament showings. The interesting stat with these guys, look at their final 2 matches of the stage. They could not win one. Going into the final week, in every single stage, they were 2-2 or better in the midseason madness, where they were 3-1. And they just couldn't win. In the Countdown Cup, doesn't really matter. To Summer Showdown, if they get that final win over the Valiant, that's a win. That is they're entering the tournament. The team that made it over them were Philly, who made it in at 2-4, and they beat Philly 3-0 pretty decisively. You get that win against Valiant, you've made a tournament. Congratulations, you've done it. They fumble a win there. Midseason Madness, I don't think it would have. I think it might have mattered, but looking at their final 2, that they won all their winnable games. Shanghai were looking good, Spark were still good, and Seoul were still good as well. They literally just came off a tournament win there. So it's like, I don't really blame it for the Midseason Madness ones. And also, side note, even if Midseason Madness tournament didn't include kickoff clash matches, they still wouldn't have made it in at 3-3. Still would have been the odd man out there. And then kickoff clash, I don't know if that Valiant match mattered, but it probably mattered for Midseason Madness. So they just got kind of not great. They have to get those wins. You can't be dropping 3 out of 4 matches to the Valiant. You can't. You cannot afford to do that, right? It's just not possible. Valiant was just farming wins off of the Hunters. It should be the other way around. You need it to be the other way around. If this team is, instead of 9-15, are what, 12-12? Yeah, 5 minus 3 is 12. Okay, got it. If you're 12-12, that looks much better, but because you're dropping matches to the Valiant, who are a good team, right? I'm not going to say they're not, but they obviously, if you want to be better than 6th in APAC, you have to beat the Valiant. That's the fact of it. It just didn't happen. The only upside to this team happened in the Countdown Cup tournament, the play-ins for the playoffs, where they beat the favorites of the Guangzhou Charge in a epic reverse sweep. Their best game of the entire season was definitely that 3-2 win over the Charge. But less than 2 hours later, they immediately play the Spark, and they just lose. They ran out of gas. There were multiple C9s in that game. The scoreline, I think, does reflect the outcome. Spark were just better, and Chengdu just didn't have it in them. Um, and that's that. The hope that we had for them lasted no amount of time at all. Quite sad. So looking at their hero usage compared to other teams, the biggest one you notice is they played a lot more Brig than most other teams, almost double, which resulted in a lot less Lucio, and Lucio was the most played character in the entire season, only their fourth most played. That's a pretty big difference. That's a pretty large difference. And it's because they enjoy Nisha on the Brig, and I guess, valid, but uh, it's not that valid. You know what I mean? I do think Nisha's Brig is better than those Lucio. I'm not going to deny that, but not having Lucio is kind of rough. It's just not great. It's just not great. So obviously putting your team in that situation already, don't know if I agree with the coaching of Yoxi there, or if Nisha was heavily pushing for it, who knows. You'll also notice they played a lot more Genji than other teams, just because Jinmu's Genji is significantly better than his Tracer. Sometimes Jinmu, best Genji in the league. These 3 wins against Philly, Philly couldn't buy a win. So it's kind of like the opposite of Valiant, right? They were able to beat Philly every time. They had Philly's number. And that helped their score. If they went even with Philly, it's even worse. 8-16. Oh my lord, that would have been tragic. So you could say it balances out, but they probably realistically should have been a team probably going even with Philly anyway, because Philly's inconsistent. So whatever. But yeah, Jinmu, his Genji's really good. Sometimes he looked like the best player in the lobby, and then other times not so great. And his Tracer, while it was able to keep up with the lower end of APAC, and once you start going up against, Prophet, Choice A1, Zest, you're not keeping up. It was serviceable. It wasn't ideal. That's why you see a lot more Genji gameplay as well. Then you'll notice a lot more Winston and Ball. That's because, Gaga was in most of the time, and I think that's the right decision. Gaga really impressed me in the midseason madness with his Ball and Winston gameplay. He would play the ball, then they'd counter the ball, and then he'd go over to the Winston, and his Winston was pretty good. I thought it was quite nice for him. But other than that, not too much, anything different compared to most other people. And that's okay. This is already probably more deviation than most teams would have. So now looking at the actual players, their DPS line of Jinmu and Leave. As I said, Jinmu could just be the best player in the lobby. Looks like the best Genji in the league sometimes, but pretty inconsistent. Leave, however, consistently there on the Sojourn. I thought his Sojourn, it's not lip tier, but it's a tier below that, probably. Now, that there were matches where even in the Countdown Cup qualifiers, that 2-3 loss to Valiant, I thought Easy Han outperformed Leave. That kind of tells you where Leave's Sojourn kind of lies for me. He can keep up. He can carry teams. I think he was the reason that they were able to look good. When he was on, and he still Leave. But his Sojourn carry performance is not quite there compared to his flex DPS. Then you have the tank line of Gaga and Daitzi. Daitzi not really pulling his weight on anything that's not Sigma. And it was pretty obvious because they wanted to go towards Gaga in the end. When it mattered in the Countdown Cup play-ins, it was Gaga that got the nod, and he got the job done. Not so much against the Spark, but against the Hunters, or against the Charge, rather. Yeah. And whenever he was put on to the off tanks, I didn't think it was that bad for him. I thought that if you give Gaga a full season to really commit him to the off tanks, it probably wouldn't have been awful. I think it would have been suitable. I think it would have been usable, And then you have Nisha Monk. If you compare them to the counterparts that they let go in Farway and Xerneas, I think it's flip a coin. I think Farway Xerneas definitely looked better, but I think Charge had higher highs in the back half of the season there, so it's pretty easy to say that. I definitely like Xerneas more than Nisha, but for Monk and Farway, take your pick. I'm not too picky. I probably prefer Farway a little bit there as well, but legit, if the meta was different, if you got a lot more, I don't know, if you got a lot more Brig, maybe you enjoy Nisha a little more. That's valid. So, whatever there. In terms of coaching, it's hard to say because this is definitely not the team that Yaxi wanted, but I think there were some misplays there. I think keeping Daitzi, again, misplay. I think playing so much Brig, probably a misplay. When Brig is almost your most played, like 5% off from Ana, kind of tells me that like something's a little up. Something's a little fishy there. Something is a little bit fishy. But yeah, looking at the for next season, we don't really have any updates on these guys. We don't know what's going on with the Chinese teams in general or the APAC teams at all. The only rumor linked to this team was that Spark were trying to get leave and have the Shy leave DPS. Now, don't know if that's still happening. It's been pretty quiet over there for the most part, but I would be pretty surprised if Leaf was still on this team. I would expect him to go to the Spark almost certainly, especially if Rui was looking to go to the Spark. It just makes a lot of sense. But for the rest of these players, I can't really picture them on other teams, especially Jinmu, Gaga, Nisha Monk. I could see maybe they get stolen by the Spark, but I can't see Gaga getting stolen when Gushway's sitting there. The Spark, big Gushway enjoyers, and I can't see Jinmu going there either because the only teams that have ever fielded Chinese players are the Charge and the Spark, and if Charge keep Choice A1, which they might not. Actually, they probably won't. So I guess Jinmu could go over there, but it's like I just don't see Jinmu on a team that's not the Charge or the Hunters. And at this point, they basically have the same players anyway. So who knows? Who knows what's going on there? But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. Chengdu, they just couldn't. They could not hold it together for a whole stage. So disappointing. Fucking losing the budget sucks. It just sucks. It's a shitty season for them. I don't know if it's going to get better. They're going to be broke still. The Chinese contender pool isn't great. I don't know where they're going to pull players from. Maybe it's not full Chinese next season. Who knows? Maybe it is, and they perform even worse, would be my guess. Because I think the Spark are going to be pulling guys in, and the Hunters are going to be fish out of water. So, I don't know. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe if you really like it. Have yourself a good one, and deuces.